All right, I am here with the team from KlezCummington. Thank you so much for being here. KlezCummington is a community-driven Yiddish cultural festival and artistic hub based in Western Massachusetts. So, for those who are unfamiliar with your work, can you tell us a bit about what KlezCummington is?
Yes. Yes, we are the three organizers of KlezCummington, which is an annual Yiddish cultural festival that happens in Cummington, Mass. People are always like, why Cummington? So it happens, which is in the hill towns in Western Massachusetts. Happens on my family's land. It's a really special place. My dad, Emmett Leader, is an amazing um, Judaica artist, builder, creator of space. And his artwork is kind of throughout, especially his ceramic creations. And the inside of the barn is almost like a Eastern European synagogue inside. And basically, the whole land is like really crafted and stewarded with so much care. And we have a wood-fired clay oven that we do a lot of baking. And food-related things that get involved in the festival. This will be our sixth year organizing and hosting this festival. It's really grassroots, Hamish in a lot of ways. It kind of organically grew out during the beginning of the COVID pandemic in 2021. A lot of us weren't able to gather, especially couldn't gather indoors, and kind of was like a natural outgrowth of like wanting community and connection and like deepening our own learning around Yiddishkeit, around klezmer music, and so many aspects of Yiddish culture that has been so transformative in my life. And all of us are artists, culture organizers as well, and have our own artistic practice. So it's been such like a creative hub for us individually and as organizers to like bring community together in music, dance, food, language, archival material, spectacle theater, puppet making, and just like so many aspects of culture and kind of uh, finding just like really meaningful, creative, deep, important ways to be together. And so this is a festival that we host, and we will have our upcoming festival July 4th weekend in Cummington.
Amazing. That sounds incredible. I'm excited to see um, the outcomes from the upcoming festival. So, yeah, sounds great. So you all describe yourselves as dedicated to the creation and deepening of Yiddish diasporic culture. What does it mean to you that the festival is an act of creation and not just preservation?
Yes, I love this question. So, as part of KlezCummington and outside, I'm a very avid pickler. And, when it comes to pickling, I love preservation. But when it comes to culture, I feel like the whole paradigm of cultural preservation is rather challenging to me because for me, culture is living. This culture that we're encountering and working with, Yiddish and all of these Jewish diasporic cultures we encounter as living culture. And that is a big part of our festival to really create a space where this culture is something that you step into and live. And so, to create new things, for me, like I was talking about this yesterday with a friend, the work that we do is bringing the past, the present, and the future into new relations with each other. So we are in the present, as far as I know. And our work is in excavating, and there's this great Elizabeth Freeman quote about this, but excavating archaic debris and undetonated energy from future possibilities. And so when we go to the past to find these materials, we change our understanding and our meaning of them in the present, and our shifting in the present allows us to create new possible futures. And when we move towards those new possible futures, it actually changes our relationship to the past. So the cycle keeps perpetuating. So no matter where we are in that, nothing is static. And so to be a part of that creation feels like a natural outgrowth of the type of work that we're already doing. As klezmer musicians, we are continuing to make this a living culture. We play for weddings and we play for demonstrations and street performances and everything in between. And for us, it is daily and it is very much a part of our lives. Ariel and I, we speak in Yiddish sometimes in the home, just because we speak Yiddish and it's a living language between us. And there are so many ways in which the festival, I think, is created on this philosophy that people should come and encounter a living culture and be a part of it and be able to see themselves as people who are making culture.
That's really special. It's really cool. Kind of like piggybacking off of that, Yiddish culture carries a really complicated history of erasure and survival. So, how does that history shape the political charge of what you all are building?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I feel like so much of it I was talking about in that last question, for us to understand our role as historical actors and the possibility that each of us has to create, affect, and change the world that we live in. To me, that's something that is rooted in my practice as a historian, what we can learn from the past and from these possibilities and continue to explore. And, there's many people who say, I've heard this, like, oh, Yiddish is a radical language or it's revolutionary. There's nothing revolutionary, inherently revolutionary about a language or even on any particular slice of culture, but it is the people that carry out and do that work, that language, that culture that themselves contain revolutionary capability. And so, while in my own journey in Yiddish, learning about these incredible radical histories was really significant, I feel it's important to, one, create spaces to share those very real and important histories, organizing strategies, principles, and values. But two, like we were talking about in the last question, to understand that these are not static and they're not set. They were for encountering a world that was and is no longer exactly the same as our world. And they offer tools and pathways and visions forward if you bring them into conversation with, thinking like we've brought these things into conversation with like Alexis Pauline Gumbs's work on like Black feminist theories through this book Undrowned and this incredible theremin concert from the 1940s and we use montage, collage, ethnographic surrealism. These are incredible like generative sites of encounter that make sure that we are actually learning how to do this cultural work. But yeah, so for me, it's acknowledging and honoring the politic that many of these people that we're lifting up and studying did adhere to, and figuring out how to bring that into the present to respond to a world with genocide, with mass warfare, with late stage capitalism. So, how do we bring these things, hold them true, and continue to carry on the legacies of this work while making new from it and responding to the world we find ourselves in? And that's for me part of living culture, what it means to embody living culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of like going off of that, like you all have spoken about rooting in the sources of joy, strength, and cultural memory as a way of resisting paralysis. I'm curious about what all this kind of looks like in practice at the festival.
Yes, and I know I've been talking a lot, so this will be the last one that I answer. I really liked these three, so I thought I would grab them. I want to talk a little bit about our festival last year. So the theme of last year's festival was Landsmannschaften. The Landsmannschaften are Jewish mutual aid groups, in this case, largely Ashkenazic, although there are some really interesting examples of some Ladino speakers that we found in New York, as well as other Jewish diasporic communities that practice adjacent forms of mutual aid under a different name. But the Landsmannschaften were immigrant mutual aid communities. So if you moved from, let's say, my ancestors are from Bobroisk, or there's also ancestors from Radom, Poland, and Belarus, to the United States, you would find the people who were a part of your Landsmannschaft. So the Bebroisker Landsmannschaft, where my grandfather's family came from, was in Baltimore, and that meant that the family ended up in Baltimore. And these Landsmannschaften were really interesting sites of culture in that these were immigrant communities that did not have a lot by way of resources. And yet, one of the most important things that they did was build and sponsor culture, continue cultural production and cultural memory. And so, why we picked this theme last year is we were trying to understand how it is that we can have, as you said, a festival that is dedicated to joy, in particular, felt really complicated to encounter, strength, and cultural memory, when it felt absolutely wrong to be celebrating in any way or engaging in pleasure, especially in Jewish communal spaces, which have felt so fraught. I'll speak for myself for a long time, but in particular for the last few years. And we really took these Landsmannschaften as examples and as models that the way towards survival is through culture, that gathering is one of the best things that you can do together. And that when you're doing this gathering, and these were incredible balls and banquets that these Landsmannschaften would throw, but it wasn't just like, I mean, yes, you would get dressed up to the nines. The musical acts were to die for. There was comedy, there was music, there was gorgeous halls that would be totally decked out for the evening, and people would spend so much time, and if they had money as a resource, on the kind of outfits that they're wearing. So it was an incredibly pleasurable sight for them. Um, but when they got there, they would read letters and they would give mutual aid to fellow workers. If there was anyone who was on strike, the goal of the event would be we show up together and we help the striking workers. Or if there were folks that were back in the home community, we make sure that we give as much money as possible to make sure that so and so can get safely out of this community if they need to leave, or that we support this fund or that fund. That mutual aid was central to this. So they were having this incredible sight of pleasure and personal transformation and communal gathering, but they were not shying away from the world as it was. And they were using that sight of joy and pleasure and dignity for these people, many of whom were working folks who did not have opportunities like this to gather and to experience. I mean, we read many amazing things about pleasure and courtship, excitement, a life outside of work. That culture and community are essential to survival, and joy and hope are a part of that practice and have been a part of that practice in our communities for centuries. That beauty and pleasure and dignity of culture is a community resource, and I feel like we really hold that true at the festival.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Sounds like a really wonderful time. Um, so KlezCummington has pushed larger, more established klezmer festivals to center queer, trans, and non-binary artists. How does visibility within a tradition become its own form of resistance?
Yeah, so KlezCummington prioritizes featuring artists who have been on the margins and who are just getting established and who are doing radical work, both artistically and politically. And I think it's so important to provide a space for people to try out new things and to push their own limits, and a space to be truly creative and think outside the box and do something different than what mainstream culture has put value on. And like we're working, I feel like queer and trans and non-binary artists have always been really strongly represented in Yiddish culture and klezmer culture, and so we're continuing that tradition, and it's still, like gaining recognition for that, and being seen for your contributions is always something that's challenging. And so I think really just uplifting that and featuring those folks, and it's a really important site of allowing, there's just so much more richness, and when we allow more voices to come to the table and have a chance to be featured, and it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So the festival is sliding scale and it starts at $0, and it explicitly centers working class and marginalized Jewish voices. I was wondering if you all could speak a little bit to how access shapes what cultural preservation can actually do.
Mm. Yeah, it's really important to us that this festival has always been totally sliding scale in terms of $0. There are different tiers that people can contribute monetarily. Um, but I feel like just kind of like the soul of what we're creating is kind of uh, yeah, kind of like what Ariel said about the richness of like adding more voices. I feel like we're really kind of like boldly trying to like enact something that our needs holistically can be met, and people want to contribute and people want to be at the table and want to care for each other. And we've just seen like so much generosity in like so many ways, and like we see that our monetary needs like are met as well, and also like enhanced by like the so many other things that are like deeply deeply important and like equally as essential to access or to being able to do this, like both for us sustainably as organizers, having a community of support. And like we're doing that, like a lot of what we're sharing is also kind of reflective of like the ecosystem that we're a part of building here. And like we're among many incredible organizers and like have different strengths and interests. And it's, I don't know, just like kind of really kind of like leaning into that patchwork of like the ways that we nourish each other. And like I feel like that is like, yeah, that is like such a deep part of the festival, is like they're it really trying to like, I don't think it's taking out, it's like outside of capitalism, because like we do need money to make this happen. And also like kind of really kind of experimenting kind of beyond like what can feel transactional, or kind of like the heightened importance on trans like money specifically. And I think we've like been like deeply moved at how people like show that they value this both monetarily and like just like showing up in really really big ways. That is like, yeah, just like I don't know. It's like not just about us.
There
Get
you are.
cut off. Did I get cut off?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Oh, that's
were.
okay.
Uh,
Okay, well
we
that's
maybe
what
missed like
happens.
30 seconds. Yeah.
So, I don't know where I started, but yeah, I just like really, I feel like, yeah, kind of like really not wanting that particularly to be a barrier to access, but actually thinking it rather that of taking away a barrier, like a greater like welcoming in, and also just kind of like giving folks like more agency too, and like sense of ownership in the process of that.
Yeah. We did hear you at the end there, but you are a little like your picture is frozen.
Yeah,
But
it's so weird. Okay, now I cool.
but we heard you.
Yeah, thanks for
We got
asking.
yours.
Cool, amazing.
Um, okay, so I this all is obviously incredible work. What is like the future you're building towards, and how can people find and support your work?
Well, the second part is really easy. So we have a website, klezcummington.com, and that has all the information about past festivals as well as this year's coming festival, how to get involved. We are off social media completely, all three of us, which is amazing. And I think actually lends a really nice character to the festival, because it means that people, when they want to be in touch with us, are really in touch with us. So we love hearing from folks. There's a contact form on the website. We check the email really regularly, and we would love to, hear from you about how you want to be involved and show up, and any ideas you might have. And the community really comes together on site and face to face. And one thing that people are often saying at our festival, I have some friends that are in their 70s that came last year, and they pulled me aside and they're like, Ozzy, it's amazing. Not a single person is on their cell phones. I haven't seen a cell phone all day. Um, and I feel like, maybe that's part of why we don't have the social media. But definitely, when we build things that are face to face and in real time community with each other, there's so many more possibilities for how we can relate and practice being together. And in terms of that second part or the first part of the question, like the future that we're building towards, speaking about practicing being together, I think a lot about Boal and how he talks about the idea of rehearsing resistance, and how we arrive at moments and sometimes we don't know what to do because we've never practiced for being in them. And of course, in Jewish tradition, there's this incredible idea that Shabbos is, our little bit of rehearsal, perhaps for the world to come, our day of rest, our day off. And that has been an incredibly radical tradition that has led to everything from weekends and labor unions and so much more. Um, But I like to think in some ways of this as a rehearsal for the world that we are trying to build. And so there's so much that we see around the festival that I really want to highlight. There's the intergenerational aspect, of course. We really value strongly the voices of all people, from the youngest children to our elders. We believe that everyone has something to contribute when it comes to building the future. And we try to make our practice in listening to all of these people and supporting ways to uplift all of those voices in our communities. Rachel talked a lot about the class and access. That is also extremely important to us, making sure that everybody can actually be at the table. And there's the class side of that, and there's also the physical and mental space accessibility that we work really hard on. And of course, we are always learning and falling short. And it is really important, for me as somebody with a physical disability, to prioritize making the space literally accessible for people. Because if you can't get your body in the door, then how are you going to be a part of the conversation? So building a space that prioritizes access. I want to talk a little bit about Yiddish and cultural specificity. So we take very seriously the work that we do, and also understand that in like a larger pan-Jewish climate, there's a lot of attention and resources that get devoted to Yiddish over other languages. And we believe that it's actually through cultural specificity and doing this work in deepness and in right relation that we can lift up and support other Jewish languages that need the resources and specificity and depth as well. And that we are doing this because this is in our world and we have access to these resources and tools. But the more we fractalize sort of the idea of there's one hegemonic, even Yiddish, like for example, there are so many different dialects. I was not taught the dialect that my family spoke when I learned Yiddish in school. And uplifting, instead of talking about an entire region or an entire language, talking about city specific work, town specific work, instrument specific work, language and vernacular, that we believe there's a real value in going deep and specific and staying slow with the relationship. That these relationships take time to develop and can be also very painful for those of us who were not given access to this for whatever reason, whether that is assimilation in our own families and communities, whether that is, the Red Scare definitely affects so many folks here as well, like what leftist possibilities look like, even in the United States. um, Class, race, sexuality, ability, all of these things affect our ability to participate. And so we are trying in our festival to make a space to rehearse what the world could look like for 2 days. Um, yeah, it's a rehearsal of the world to come. And for us, that's through culture and through gathering and singing together, being together. Um, of course, the moment that happens after you stop singing, you know the one I'm talking about. Um, and learning and sharing and building a space where everybody has the possibility to affect culture.
So beautiful. Thank you. Amazing. So thank you all so much for joining me. This has been great.